The Disney Plus shows are a prime example of Marvel just sort of doing anything to make a quick buck. When it was initially announced that we were getting some MCU TV shows, I was somewhat excited since this was a chance for the MCU to explore stories that would probably just get briefly mentioned in a movie, just to be forgotten about. The shows are meant to fill in the small gaps that the MCU tends to have when diving into the bigger storylines. No one is going to care about what happened to the Loki in Endgame or what happened to Wanda after Endgame in a movie. So why not just have a couple episodes of a TV series which allows the viewers to enjoy the minor stuff and have just as good of a time watching it as you would any MCU movie. Now, this is a good idea, yep, big brain plan, but in my opinion, the MCU does not execute the idea well at all. I'll first start off by talking about the best of the MCU TV shows, which even still has its problems, that being Falcon and the Winter Soldier. What makes Falcon and the Winter Soldier so special to me is not only did we get actual development for someone like Falcon, who before this show I couldn't even tell you a unique character trait he had. Meanwhile, Bucky to me was just sort of edgy, and I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really like him too much before the show came out. Not only do we see how Cap retiring affects his two best friends, but we see the rift it makes between the two, with Sam not being sure if he can take up Cap's mantle and denying it, while Bucky wants to fill in for shoes that are way too big for him. All of this, plus with the fake Captain America enhancing the conflict as a whole, actually allowed me to enjoy the show for the majority of the time. Keyword majority, because the only thing that kind of sucked about this show were the other villains, that being the Flag Smashers. Their whole idea was, oh, we are being killed, so let's stand our ground by killing people ourselves. And what I like about this show in particular is that we get to see a lot of human problems. Like, the main issues are just Falcon and Bucky actually arguing with each other and not being a good duo. Meanwhile, the story makes you try to feel bad for the Flag Smashers, but this just doesn't hit at all. But it's okay because Zemo carried. Overall, I'm gonna rate this a solid 8 out of 10. The best of the MCU TV shows to me explored aspects of the characters that we for sure never would have gotten in the movies, plus it actually further set up for what's to come in Phase 4 and filled in some gaps. But don't think this video is misleading, because this is where it all goes downhill. It's time to talk about WandaVision. Oh my god! WandaVision to me was just a complete waste of time. The sitcom aspect of the show wasn't really all that appealing to me, and genuinely, besides the White Vision and I guess Wanda becoming Scarlet Witch, which doesn't really feel earned at all, but hey, cool fight scene, the show kind of felt like filler for the first half, and then the most depth we got for Wanda is that she's just crazy and coping. Low-key, you don't need to watch this before Doctor Strange either, since even with context, it's just, oh, Wanda's mentally unstable. Like, can we stop, using that excuse, bruh? Can we use something else, bruh? Oh, she's mentally unstable. Her boyfriend died. Oh, it's the Darkhold. Oh, it's altering her mind. Like, fuck off, bro. Now, next up is Loki, which in actuality is not a bad show, but I feel like it's just very useless for the MCU to have. Besides the statement of Doctor Strange not being able to help Peter in No Way Home because of what Loki did, I see no reason as to why this show exists. And I'm a big Loki fan, so, this show should just be very appealing to me, but I feel like Loki's character ended in Infinity War perfectly. And so me seeing a Loki who hasn't even gotten that development then just go on this crazy ass arc, personally, I don't really care for it. And also, I just gotta say, this show's episode 1 by far has the worst episode 1 out of any MCU show. It's just Loki quipping while getting bodied by time security guards. So WandaVision, I'll probably give it a 3 or a 2, and then this Loki show I'd probably give a 6. Next up is Hawkeye, which I actually had high hopes for since Clint is my favorite MCU character, and seeing how they dealt with Sam post Endgame. I was super excited to see their take on Clint post Endgame, but the show really just did the bare minimum. Instead of focusing more on Hawkeye needing to sacrifice his actual life for the mission, plus seeing him confront Black Widow's sister, and plus him having to deal with the consequences of his past, should give us some of the more emotional scenes in the MCU. So why is it that in every single scene with Natasha's sister, she's speaking about macaroni and cheese or throwing a joke about Americans because she's Russian? Listen, man, I'm not a comedian, but her talking about macaroni and cheese for 5 minutes is not comedic. And not to mention, the addition of Kate Bishop to me feels very pointless. Like, why is she even in the show besides for people to say that there is a new Hawkeye around? Her backstory does tie with Hawkeye, which I do appreciate, but why do we even need her in the first place? What I'm saying is that we have plenty of stuff just for a story with Clint alone. But with Kate here, we can't get that fully explored because we have the Kingpin shit. By the way, if you guys watch Daredevil before watching this show, you're gonna hate this show even more. Because Kingpin comes off as not only a moron, but also he just gets sort of negged at the end for no reason, and it's kind of ridiculous. But yeah, I think with no Kate Bishop, we wouldn't have Kingpin, and maybe we could just set up Echoes as her own antagonist, along with Natasha's sister, and give Clint, who is one of the best MCU characters, one of the best arcs. But instead, we got some of the MCU's worst jokes, but some pretty decent action scenes. Honestly, I would give this show a 7, but because I had high hopes for it, I'm giving it a 5. Now look, the next show I technically should talk about is Marvel What If, but that show genuinely gives me a headache to talk about, and I'm probably just gonna go on a whole rant about the show. So let me know down below if you guys want me to make a video regarding just specifically Marvel What If, but just so you know, my score is like a 1 out of 10 for that. And now the last show we're gonna be talking about is Moon Knight, which, I mean, yeah, it's a show. It's a show called Moon Knight, but Moon Knight to me is the definition of an average TV show at best. Besides episode 1, which I found to be particularly nice and simplistic and sort of giving me that early CW Flash Arrow vibe, I was excited to see this weirdo with split personality beat up some people, but right after episode 1, I feel like the show just sort of slugs itself to the finish line. The pacing in episode 1 is nice and just gives you enough time to enjoy everything. However, episodes 2 to 5 are a little weird to me, with the villain's main plan as well not really making any sense to me. I feel like the story is just a little more convoluted than it needs to be, plus just the Moon Knight action itself is severely lacking. I hate everything they do with the funny Mr. Knight, and the way Mark discovers their personalities just feels so rushed to me, and it's something that the MCU sort of had a problem with Spider-Man years earlier, where yeah, the character is named Spider-Man, but just because he's named Spider-Man doesn't make him Spider-Man. And that to me is what Moon Knight sort of feels like. It sort of feels like a CAC version of him. And granted, yeah, you could be different with the comics, but to the point where this character just feels very bland, when Mark in actuality is one of the more complicated characters in Marvel, is kind of crazy to me. And not to mention, I couldn't even imagine the time you guys had to wait every single week for some of these episodes. Because the way I'm talking right now, I didn't wait for week to week for Moon Knight. I waited for it to finish along with a lot of the other shows, with the exception of Falcon. I'm giving Moon Knight like a 4 out of 10. Besides Falcon, which even had its problems, none of the MCU shows really executed the idea of small stories being just as entertaining as the movies. Rather, it's kind of like how it sounds, a story so small that people are just gonna forget about it. If I could just put it all into one sentence, Disney Plus, drop some good shows.